is the array list. You'll find program EX01 array list demo. Well, what an array list does is it stores your data and allows you to manipulate it fairly easily, and it will allow duplicate data. It basically is just a fancy array, so to speak. Now, the way we define these items are by first giving it the type array list, and then here, this is kind of a new syntactical type that we haven't used before. This word string in the angle brackets, although it looks somewhat like HTML code, it really isn't. What it is doing is telling the array list that your base class will be a string. In other words, you're going to put strings into your array list. Of course, we'll call our array list to-do list. So we're going to run this program and enter some data. We'll have keyboard action here. We'll do this while loop. While not done, we'll ask the user to input an entry, and then we'll simply add using this command, which is one of the array list commands, to add our element to our to-do list. We'll ask for another one. Would you want another one? Yes or no? And we'll simply loop around. So let's see how this program works. Enter the list of entries when prompted. Here we go. Input an entry. So let's just enter some, whoops, I entered a blank entry. We'll say I want to enter some more items. So my first entry is going to be blank now. And then we'll say our entry here will be a horse. And then we'll hit enter. We'll say yes once again. How about pig? And how about, after we enter one more, we'll say cow. And now we'll say no to complete it. And now notice our list is printed: horse, pig, cow, and of course there's my first one, my blank one. So to add to a list, it's very simple to do. All we have to do is create our list and then use the keyword add, and whichever type of element you're going to store in your list, that's what you're add. In other words, next here has been defined as a string because that's what we said we were going to put in our array list, were strings. Notice when we step through our array list, we can do it using the enhanced for loop. Since the to-do list is an array, although it's a specialized array, it's an array list, we can use that as an entry to a for loop, an enhanced for loop header. Remember, the enhanced for loop header will take an array entry, and then this item will be what the enhanced for loop processes. In other words, each time through the loop, it will read your to-do list. Excuse me, let's get that out of there. It will read your to-do list and place it in entry, and then of course print it out. So pretty simple stuff there. We're just showing you that you can easily add to an array list and access it using the enhanced for loop. There are many ways we can step through these lists, and so in example 2, notice we're importing a few more items here. One thing we're importing is the iterator. This is one way we can step through a for loop. So on this example, let's see what we're going to do here. First of all, as we create our item list, we're making it of type list. Remember, we can't instantiate this because list is an interface. But we're saying our base class here will be string, just as in our previous example. When we instantiate our item list, we will instantiate it as an array list. That is the class that you can implement, as we saw in our earlier diagram. Here's our collection, here's our list, it's an interface, and now our array list is the class that can implement the list which inherits or extends collection. We're going to once again add to our list some woodwind instruments here, and then we're going to show you different ways that we can access them. So we simply add this way. We can access our array list just as we would any other array. Well, I shouldn't say just, it's slightly different, but it's the same idea. In other words, we can step through it using a for loop, a standard for loop with the word index as our subscript, but this time our subscript goes into a get method. If you were actually accessing a normal array, what you would do is you would use the square brackets. If item list was a normal array, you'd say item list square brackets index. but since item list is an array list, it has objects associated with, or methods associated with it, and one of those methods, of course, is the get method. So we can get each individual item and step through that, and which then lets you realize that you can access these items in any order that you want to, as long as you manipulate this index. A second way to just iterate or step through the list is, as we just saw in our last example, the enhanced for loop, using the array list as our array parameter here that is interpreted and put in our temporary item and printed out each time. A third way that we can iterate through an array list is by using what's known as an iterator. An iterator is like a pointer. In other words, it can keep track of where you're currently at as you step through your list. So what we do is we create an iterator. It will be the same type as your array list, your same base type, and I'm going to call it my iterator, and we set it equal to the items list current iterator. In other words, we link those two together so that my iterator will be pointing to the item list. So we can use a for loop now. Remember, for loop or while loops check on top. We're going to use a while loop, not a for loop. While loops do their test on top, so we're going to say while my iterator has next. In other words, as long as there's another record to read, we're going to go out and print it, and then we're going to say let's print that record. So there we're using that iterator. It keeps track of what's left, kind of like almost an end of file pointer, something like that, but it knows if there's more items to use, and if there are, well, it will go get the next one for you. A fourth way of working through this list is using a while loop with a counter, very similar to our for loop, because once again we're using the get method. We're just setting an index to 0, just like we did in our for loop, here up a little bit higher. And we're saying while the index is less than the item list dot size, which is what we did with our for loop, we increment at the bottom of the loop, which the for loop header did for us, and once again we'll print out the item list dot get index. So that's really that you're accessing the list in the same way. You're just using a different structure, a repetition structure to process it. And the final way that I want to show you is by creating what's known as an anonymous inner class. We can take our item, our list, our array list, and for each item in our array list, we're going to create a new anonymous inner class. We're going to create this new consumer that takes a string parameter, and then we will simply, in our method down here, our inner class method, we will tell it to accept that string. We'll send it the temporary item, and it will print that out. So when we run this, you'll see that our output looks exactly the same in each of our 5 cases, which is the point. It should. And you're going to pick the way to access these lists depending on your situation, depending on what you're trying to accomplish or what you need to work with. But you can see in every case our array list, which is an ordered list, in the fact that it stays in the order that you enter them, you put them in that data, in that structure, will always print out the same. Our next example, example 03. Now example 3 is going to implement, in this case, or create this time, what's known as a hash set. Now a hash set is first of all, sets will not allow duplicates. Now you know what, let's go back to our example 02 list iterating for just a second. Let me just copy, I want to show you this. I meant to mention this and it slipped my mind. Notice when I create an array list, it will allow me to have duplicate elements in my list. There's no problem with that because it keeps track of items, like I said, just as an array in its little compartment to store its data, and then it's accessed in these various ways. But in other words, it allows duplicates. Hash sets do not allow duplicates. The sets have to have unique items because when you create a set, it actually uses the item itself as its key when you create one this way. So we are going to this time import hash set. We'll create a new hash set with base type string. We'll call it simply S. and then we'll instantiate that new hash set. You add to your hashes the same way you do to an array list. We just use the word add. But notice this time, when I create my list, health, love, money, money 2, money 2, notice I'm trying to add the same element twice. It won't give me any error, but it will not allow that second money 2 to be added. It has to be unique. So what we're going to do then is, once we add the list, we'll print it out. Again, notice the enhanced for loop, nothing new there. But then right after that, we're going to remove the last item in our hash set. Now another thing you'll notice, that when we create this hash set, when we print it back out, it's not going to be in the same order that we entered them. It might be, but chances are it won't be. Because order is not one of the things it keeps track of in a hash set. It's like everybody's in a big pool, so to speak, and we're just going to throw our data wherever we have an empty spot in the pool, and then we'll retrieve it in no specific order. So we're going to, when we say remove last, that will not necessarily remove the last thing we added. It will just remove the last thing in the set, which again may or may not be the last thing we added. First of all, I'm going to comment out this duplicate. We'll worry about that in a second. So let's run this now and see what happens. So we have, in our program, we entered our data, health, love, money, money 2. Notice the set came back, love, money, health, money 2. We then removed the last item in the set, which in this case was money 2. It's just a coincidence that it was the last thing we added as well. And now it says that the set now contains love, money, and health. When I add money 2 again, at the bottom, it can re-add it because it was not a duplicate. But notice if I uncomment out this line and run my routine one more time, notice now that although I tried to add money 2 twice, it would never allow me to do it. Love, money, health, money 2. I removed money 2, and then I was able to re-add it. So we're just demonstrating here how sets avoid duplicates. All right, well, I hope that helps you understand a little bit about those first 3 examples. We have a few more examples to go, but I'll put those in a second video. Thanks for watching, and keep programming. Good luck.